I was a guide in these mountains for 31 years. In 31 years, I never lost a client. Not one. Men got turned around. Men got drunk. Men shot at shadows, but they all walked out the other side. Because I walked them out. That was the thing I had. Instead of money or a wife or a church, I never lost a man. Then I lost 7 men in 9 days, though one of them kept breathing after. And that's the part you'll wish by the end of this that I'd left out. Pull that log over and sit where I can see your face. The fire likes faces. I'll explain that later. Or I won't, depending on how the night goes. Not too close, though. People always want to get up against a fire on a cold night. They think the heat and the safety are the same thing. They aren't. The fire doesn't love you. It eats what you feed it. And if you lie down beside it and forget yourself, it will eat you too. I've watched it happen to better men than you. So sit there across from me where I can keep an eye on both of us. I've got 7 pieces of wood set out beside me here. You probably noticed. Good split oak, dried 2 seasons. I cut them this afternoon the way I do whenever somebody comes up the mountain asking me to tell this. 7 pieces. 7 men. I'll feed them in one at a time, slow, across the night. Don't ask me why yet. By the time the 7th one goes in, you'll know and you'll wish you didn't. There. The first one. Watch how it catches. I guided the Ozark National Forest, the real backcountry of it, the parts the maps draw with a lot of confidence and not much truth. I knew the hollows and the ridge lines the way you know the inside of your own mouth with your tongue. Where the springs ran sweet and where they ran iron. Which limestone caves breathed cold air in summer. Which sinkholes would take a careless boot and never give it back. I was good. I'll say that plain because it's the start of the sin. I was proud of being good. You came up here because you heard a piece of it. Everybody hears a piece. The piece they hear is the howler. The Ozark howler. Black as a wet stump, big as a bull, horns like a goat, and eyes that throw the light back red. And a cry that isn't a wolf and isn't a panther and isn't anything God put a name to. Old folks down in the valley still won't say it out loud after dark. They've got their reasons. Their grandfathers had their reasons. There's a place I won't draw you a map to. The locals called it Howler Hollow, and they called it that long before I was born. And they didn't go there. Not the brave ones, not the drunk ones, not the ones who'd dare anything for $1. A whole forest of men who'd wrestle a black bear for fun. And they walked the long way around one particular fold of ground, because their people told them to, and never fully said why. I knew all that. That's important. I knew it the way you know the stove is hot, and I went anyway. And I took 7 men with me, because they paid me more money than I'd ever held at one time. My first sin wasn't murder. Remember that. People always want the monster to be the first thing. My first sin was a number with too many zeros. And the way I told myself the old stories were just stories. So a stranger's money would feel clean in my hand. They came up from 3 different states in the back end of October. A cold autumn, the kind that gets into your knuckles. The hardwoods had gone past their color into rust and brown, and the leaves came down wet and stayed wet. So the whole forest floor was soft and dark and smelled like a root cellar. Fog every morning in the low ground that didn't burn off till near noon. I should have read all of that as a warning. I read it as good cover for game 7 men. Let me give them to you one at a time because they each earned their own telling. And because the order matters more than you know yet. Toby, a trophy man through and through. He didn't hunt to eat and he didn't even really hunt to win. He hunted to keep. He could peel the coat off a deer in one piece like he was undressing it for bed. And he talked about it the way other men talk about women. He said the skin was the only honest part of an animal. He said the meat lies, but the hide tells the truth. Gantry. Just Gantry. Never a first name offered. A loud man. The kind who fills a silence because silence frightens him. He'd read all about the howler online, and he thought the whole thing was hilarious. The first night he stood up at the fire, threw his head back and let out a long warbling howl up at the dark, mocking it, then looked around for everybody to laugh with him. He did it most nights after that. He'd cup his hands and call into the trees, and the trees gave him nothing back, and that made him do it louder. Wade, the gunman. Wade trusted steel and powder more than he trusted any person living, and he'd tell you so. 3 rifles of his own, a pistol under his head at night, and the same line every man like him says. A problem you can't solve with a gun is just a problem you haven't shot enough yet. He laughed when he said it. He believed it under the laugh Ellis, the navigator, an engineer in his regular life. A tidy, careful man who didn't drink and didn't curse and treated the wilderness like a math problem he'd been hired to grade. He carried a survey map and a brass compass that had belonged to his father, and he told me kindly that a man with proper instruments could never truly be lost. I should have argued with him. I didn't because he was paying Sutter, the quiet one, older, gray, a watcher. He knew things about the Howler that didn't come from a website. When Gantry did his howling, Sutter didn't laugh and he didn't tell him to stop either. He just watched the dark where the sound went and got a look on his face like a man counting something. The second night I caught him looking at me that same way. I didn't know why. I didn't like it. And I forgot about it, because I had no idea yet how much that look would come to mean Joel. The good one. There's one in every group, and there was one in this one. Youngish, gentle, the sort who carried other men's packs up the hard pitches without being asked and gave away his own dry socks. He'd come because his brother had wanted to, and his brother had died that spring, and this was a thing they were supposed to do together. So he did it alone and sad. He talked to me like I was a person and not a service. That mattered more to me than I let on at the time. It matters more to me now than anything else in the world. Before this fire is out, I'll have to tell you what I did to him, and I'd give the rest of my life not to, and Finn the youngest. The seventh. Just a kid. 22, 23. Quick-eyed and quiet and watchful in a different way than Sutter. He'd been hunting since he could walk, and he had that animal attention the best young hunters have, where they're reading the whole woods at once without trying. He didn't talk much. He listened. He's the reason I'm sitting here, and he's the reason I can't sleep most nights, and I'll get to all of it. But you have to be patient. The fire's got all night, and so do I, 7 men. I led them in on a Tuesday, into the soft, wet, rust-colored dark, toward a fold of ground their grandfathers wouldn't speak of. And I told myself the old stories were just stories. The first 2 days, nothing happened, and that's its own kind of horror looking back. 2 clean days we hunted. We made distance. We made a base camp in a flat spot above a creek, with good water and a stand of old cabins nearby. The kind of derelict squatter shacks you find back in there sometimes, falling in on themselves, blind windows, the doors long gone. I told the men to leave the cabins be. Animals den in them, and worse than animals. Toby went and poked around one anyway. Of course he did. The hunting was strange, though. I want you to understand the quiet. A live forest is loud if you know how to hear it. Birds arguing, squirrels working. The small constant business of 1,000 small lives. Howler Hollow had none of it. We'd walk into a stand of timber and it would just stop, the way a room of people goes quiet when the wrong man walks in. Animal silence where there should be sound. The men noticed and made jokes about it. I noticed and didn't. That first night at the base camp, I built the fire up bigger than I needed it. I told the men it was for warmth. It wasn't. There's a thing a guide learns. A good fire keeps the dark at a polite distance, and I wanted distance that night for reasons I couldn't have put a name to. The fire wouldn't behave. I have to tell you about the fire, because the fire was the first thing in Howler Hollow that lied to me, and I should have listened to the lie. It burned low and blue at the base when it had no business doing that. Dry oak over good coals. And the flames didn't stand up straight the way flames do in still air. They leaned, all of them together the same way, toward the black wall of timber behind the cabins, like a field of grass bent under a wind none of us could feel on our faces. I held my hand up over the coals. The air was dead still, and the fire leaned anyway, reaching, the way a dog points at something in the brush. Wade laughed and said it was a draft off the creek. Ellis said it was cold air sinking off the ridge and sliding through the bottom. A katabatic flow, he called it. He had a word for everything. They were probably right. Reasonable men with reasonable words, but I sat there and watched my fire bow to the dark like it was being called, and something in the back of my neck stood up. The old animal part that knows a thing before the thinking part agrees to it, and then there was the sound. Off in the timber, far up some hollow, a sound that began like a howl and cut off before it finished, like something practicing. Or clearing its throat to begin. 3 times that first night, always from a different quarter of the dark. Always too short to swear I'd heard it at all. The men were loud and missed every one. I caught all 3. And here's a thing I'll set down plain and not explain. Each time it started, my own breath caught and held. Not from fear, The way your mouth waters before you've consciously smelled the food. My body answered the sound before my mind did. I thought I was just on edge. I told myself that a lot in those days. Toby couldn't leave the cabins alone. While the rest of us ate, he pulled a brand out of the fire and walked off to the nearest one, and we watched his torchlight move around behind the blind black windows. He was in there a long time. When he came back, his eyes were bright in a way I didn't care for. He said there were hides in there. Old ones nailed up on the walls in rows. Deer and fox and things he couldn't put a name to, so old they'd gone to leather and dust. Hundreds of them. Like somebody had been carrying skins back to that cabin for 100 years, tacking them up to cure, and never once coming back to collect. He said it the way a man describes a church he'd like to be buried in. He said whoever did all that knew exactly what he was about. He said he was going back at first light to look at it proper. I told him to leave the cabins be. You already know how much good that did, and Sutter watched me. I keep circling back to Sutter because his were the only eyes in that camp I could feel on my skin. While Toby went on about his wall of hides and Gantry laughed too loud at nothing, and Wade ran a rag down a rifle that was already clean, Sutter sat back just out of the firelight and watched me across the flames. Steady, patient, the way you watch a kettle you're waiting to hear sing. I asked him finally what he kept looking at. He took his time. Then he said out of nowhere, "When you were a boy, did you ever sleepwalk?" Just that. I told him I had as a kid, that I'd long grown out of it. He nodded, slow, like I'd confirmed a thing he'd already half decided, and he didn't ask me anything else. I lay awake a while, wondering how a man lands on that question of all questions. Then I forgot it. I forgot everything that mattered. That was the gift the Hollow gave me, the forgetting. And it was the cruelest thing it ever did. Worse than the teeth. Finn noticed things too. But quieter and not about me. Not yet. He walked the edge of camp before he turned in, the way the good young hunters do, reading the ground in the last of the light. I watched him stop in the soft mud down by the creek and crouch and look at something for a long, long time without a word. In the morning I would understand he'd found the first of the tracks. The barefoot ones. The ones that started too close. But that first night he just looked and frowned and stood up and said nothing. Because the sign in front of him didn't add up yet, and a careful hunter doesn't speak before the count is finished. He'd finished the count. It would take him 6 dead men to finish it all the way, but he started that first night crouched in the mud holding his tongue, while I built my fire too big and watched the flames lean out at the trees like they wanted to go home. The first night in Deep I slept badly. I want to be careful here because this is where it starts, and I will not lie to you. I'll only tell you what I remember and what I found. My memory of this whole thing is not a road. It's a row of windows with the dark between them, and I can only show you what's lit. What I remember is lying down by the fire, tired in a clean, honest way. What I remember next is gray morning light and my own breath fogging, and the taste of dirt in my mouth. Real dirt, gritty, dark, packed under my back teeth like I'd been chewing the ground. My jaw ached down deep in the hinge. My boots were off, and I never sleep with my boots off in the backcountry. Never. 31 years. And my bare feet were filthy and cold and scratched, soles black with mud, and there was a long, shallow cut across the back of one hand I had no memory of getting. I told myself I'd sleepwalked. I'd done it as a boy. I told myself I'd kicked my boots off in the night and wandered to the creek half asleep and fallen. It explained the mud and the feet and the cut. It didn't explain the dirt in my mouth, and it didn't explain why I felt, under the confusion, so deeply and quietly rested. Not tired, rested, fed rested, like a man who'd eaten well after a long hunger. I noticed that feeling, and I shoved it down, because I didn't have a box for it. That was the first of the missing hours. There would be more. I didn't count them yet. I count everything now. Toby was the first. He'd gone out before light on the 3rd morning alone against my standing rule to that cabin with the wall of hides. He didn't come back for the midday meet. By afternoon we went looking, and it was Wade who found the cabin, and it was Wade who came back out of it the color of ash and couldn't make words for a minute. Just pointed, this big, loud, gun-proud man with his mouth working and nothing coming out. I went in. I'd seen dead men before. Hunting kills people every season. Careless people, unlucky people, and a guide gets called to the bad scene sometimes. I thought I knew the worst a body could be. I didn't. Toby was on the floor of that cabin, and at first my eye couldn't take it apart, couldn't sort what I was seeing, because it was wrong in a way that had a kind of craft to it. There was a deer hide over him, a big doe's hide, fresh, raw, the inside still wet and red, but it wasn't laid over him like a blanket, and it wasn't draped on him like a costume. It was attached. Somebody had taken the hide and stitched it onto him. Into him. Through the skin with sinew. Long, even loops of it, the way Toby himself would lace a hide onto a stretching frame. Around his arms. Across his chest. Up the sides of his face. The doe's coat sewn to a man's body, so that where his own skin showed through the gaps, it was hard to tell which animal you were looking at. His mouth had been pulled open and the hide brought up under his jaw, so the doe's neck skin made a kind of second throat below his. The skinner had been skinned into his prey. The man who said the hide tells the truth had been made into a hide that told one. There was no blood spread around. That's the thing that broke something in Wade and in me both. The work was clean, patient, done by hands that knew exactly how to take an animal apart and put it back together wrong, and done slow enough that whoever did it could keep their hands from shaking. No tracks I could read except Toby's coming in and something dragging out. And a smell in there under the meat smell, a wet animal musk I knew and couldn't place. Wade wanted to know who could do that. Ellis wanted to know how anybody got close enough. Sutter didn't say anything. Sutter looked at the loops of sinew. And then he looked at my hands. I looked at my hands too. There was nothing on them. I checked. I want you to know I checked, standing there over Toby. I turned my own hands over and looked at the nails, and they were clean. And I felt relief. And I have hated myself for that relief every day since. Because a man with nothing to hide doesn't check his nails over a corpse. That night I went through my pack. For no reason I could have told you. Just a cold animal urge to take inventory of myself. And folded down in the bottom under my spare socks was a small curl of deer sinew. Just a piece. Like a thread off a spool. I didn't carry sinew. I had no use for it. I stood there holding it, and the only thing my mind would do was make excuses. And I made them. And I put the sinew in the fire and watched it shrivel, and I told myself I'd forgotten packing it. That's the second window I can show you. Make of it what you want. I made nothing of it. That was my gift and my crime. The not making. The first piece of wood was for Toby. I'll let you sit with that while it burns. We should have walked out. I want to say that plainly. After Toby, any sane party walks out, and a guide worth his pay marches them out at gunpoint if he has to. I told them we'd leave at first light. They wouldn't go. That's the truth, and it's an ugly one. Wade said no animal did that, and no man could have done that without help. And he wasn't leaving until he'd put a bullet in whatever it was. Gantry, gray-faced but loud as ever, said it was the Howler. It was real, and how often does a man get to bag a real legend? Even Ellis, careful Ellis, said the responsible thing was to document, to map the site, to leave properly and not in a panic. Only Sutter and Joel and the boy sided with leaving. 3 against 4. And I was the guide, and the guide's voice should have counted for 10. And I let the money count instead. They'd paid for 9 days. I told myself I owed them the days. That's the last lie I'll catch myself in for a while. After this, it gets harder to find the lies, because I stopped being able to see myself. Gantry took Toby's death personal like the forest had insulted him. That night he stood at the edge of the firelight and howled into the dark. Longer and louder than he ever had. A real ugly mockery of it, his throat raw with it. Daring the thing to answer. And something answered. Not from the ridge. I want you to hold on to where the sound came from because later it's everything. The men all turned to face the ridgeline, the high dark wall of timber to the north. Because that's where you expect a thing like that to live. Up high, looking down. But the answering cry didn't come from up there. It came from low and close. From somewhere in the soft ground behind the cabins, almost from among us. So close that I felt it in my own chest, a pressure behind my breastbone like a second heartbeat trying to start. I remember pressing my hand flat to my own chest. I remember the strangeness of feeling the howl resonate inside me, like I was the drum and not the ear. The other men felt it come from out there. I felt it come from in here. I didn't understand that difference then. I noticed it. I always noticed and never understood. That was the shape of the whole 9 days. Gantry went white and shut his mouth and didn't howl again that night. But the damage was done. Whatever you want to call it, he'd called. And it had hurt. It got into Gantry slow. By the next afternoon he had a cough, a wet barking thing low in his chest, and by evening he'd lost most of his voice, which on any other man would have been a mercy. He kept clearing his throat, this awful scraping hawk, and looking annoyed about it, like the wilderness had given him a head cold. In the night he started making a sound in his sleep. I lay awake and heard it. All of us did. This low, building moan that climbed at the end into something with a curl in it, something that wanted to be a howl and couldn't get the shape right, like a bad echo of the thing in the dark trying to come up out of his throat. He'd wake himself with it, gagging, and look around wild, and we'd settle him and he'd drop off and it would start again. I remember almost nothing of that night past midnight. There's a window and then there's the dark. In the window, Gantry's moan turning mid-rise into a wet, tearing gurgle, then the dark. Then gray light and the dirt taste again, worse this time, and a fullness in my belly that I did not question, because I was already running toward the sound of Joel shouting. Gantry was sitting upright against a stump where none of us had put him. His head back, his mouth wrenched wide open, wider than a mouth opens. The hinge of his jaw had given, and his throat was ruined from the inside. You understand, not cut, not torn at from without, burst outward. The soft tissue of it shredded and averted like something had clawed its way up through him, and out his open mouth into the morning air. His eyes were still open, and the expression on what was left of his face wasn't pain. It was effort, strain, the look of a man pushing with everything he had to get a sound out, a sound too big for the instrument, a howl that finally came through him, and took him apart on the way. The mocker who couldn't make the cry right had the cry made through him. I crouched by him. I want you to know I crouched right down by that wreck of a throat and I breathed in, deep without deciding to, the way you'd lean over a pot to smell what's cooking. And the smell, the blood smell, the deep iron stink of a man's insides open to the cold, it did not turn my stomach. It steadied me. It poured into me and smoothed something out, the way a drink smooths out a shaking man. I felt calm. I felt the way you feel coming in from the cold into a warm kitchen. Sutter was watching me again. He'd seen me breathe it in. I caught his eyes and we looked at each other for a long second over Gantry's body. And there was a question in his face he wasn't ready to ask, and an answer in mine I wasn't able to give. And then I stood up too fast and told everyone to get their gear. We were leaving. Now. No argument. There was a tooth in my pocket. I found it later, feeling for my knife. A man's molar with a little blood at the root. I didn't look at it long. I dropped it in the creek. The second piece of wood is for Gantry. The fire's hungry tonight. You feel that? How it leans toward you when the wind moves. Don't lean back at it. It's not asking you a question. We tried to leave. I'll give us that. We broke camp, and I put us on the cleanest trail out, the one I'd walked in on. And we hiked hard for 3 hours through the fog and the wet leaves. The men strung out behind me, quiet and scared, and we came over a low rise, and down into a flat, and there were the cabins. Our cabins, our camp, the cold fire pit, Gantry's body where we'd had to leave it, wrapped in a tarp because you can't carry a man like that out over that ground. I have to tell you what that walk was like, because the walk was its own kind of dying, slower than the rest, and it happened to all 6 of us at once. It started well. That's what undid us. The first hour was clean ground, downhill, easy. The men's spirits climbing with every step away from the cabins. Somebody even laughed. I led because I knew the way you know your own name. We crossed the creek at a gravel bar I recognized. Stepped over on the same flat stones I'd stepped on coming in. An hour later, we crossed the same gravel bar again. I knew it was the same one. There was a split white oak on the far bank, lightning struck years back, grown up into the shape of a man standing with both arms raised over his head. And there is not another tree like it in all that country. We had crossed below it going what I would have sworn on my mother's grave was due southwest, and here it was again, the same struck oak with its arms up, the same gravel, the creek running the same direction. And not one of us had felt himself turn. Nobody said anything the first time. We just crossed it again faster, heads down, and I picked a harder line up onto the ridge shoulder, where you can keep the sun pinned on your left and not lose your heading no matter what. We came down off that ridge a full hour later, into a little flat, And there was the oak. The man-shaped oak. Arms raised. Patient as a fence post. Waiting on us. That was when the arguing started. Wade said flat out I'd gotten us turned around. I told him I had not been turned around in 31 years and I was not turned around now. And even as the words came out of me, I heard exactly how they sounded. A man insisting on a thing the ground in front of his own boots was calling a liar. Ellis got his father's compass out and swore on his instruments that we'd held our heading true the whole way. Gantry said, "No, no." Gantry was dead by then, wrapped in the tarp we kept circling back to. You see what the telling does to me? It gives me back men I've already buried. My mouth keeps wanting there to be more of us standing there than there were. Forgive an old man that... Ellis said it was the iron in the limestone bending the needle and the broken ground tricking our feet. He said on slopes a man drifts a few degrees with every step and never feels it, and over miles a drift becomes a circle. It was reasonable. Everything that careful man ever said was reasonable. So we did it his way. We checked the needle every 100 yards. We held it dead on west. We walked slower and more deliberate than I have walked in my whole life. 6 grown men creeping across that bottom like we were diffusing the ground itself. And the struck oak came around a 4th time. This time the boy, Finn, just sat down in the wet leaves and put his head in his hands. He didn't cry and he didn't curse. He just sat, like a child who's been walked past his own house too many times to keep believing he'll ever be let in. Joel went and sat down in the mud beside him and put an arm over his shoulders and didn't say anything either. And nobody would say the thing we had all finally arrived at, which was that the way out was not there anymore. That the hollow had quietly folded the door shut behind us while we slept. That we could walk west until our boots came apart on our feet. And we would keep arriving under that gray oak with its arms raised, because the country had taken our good straight line and tied the 2 ends of it together somewhere we couldn't see. It was Sutter who finally said it out loud. Flat. Not even scared. Almost gentle, the way you tell a dying man a thing he already knows. He said, "It isn't going to let us leave until it's done with us." And he was looking at me when he said it. Not at the trees. Not at the ridge at me. I let myself believe he meant the hollow. The howler, the curse on the place. I let myself believe that because the other thing was unbearable, and a man can carry a great deal of weight a long way if you let him pick which shoulder. But that is not what Sutter meant. I know now exactly what he meant. He had already begun to understand that the thing that wasn't going to let us leave was not out in the timber, turning our feet in circles. It was walking at the head of the line. Carrying a compass it had no use for. Telling 6 tired men it knew the way home. We made camp again. We had no choice with the light going. And that night Ellis sat up by the fire with his map spread on his knees and a stub of pencil plotting. And he said to me, quiet, "We came in from the southeast. I'll take us out due west, then cut north below the ridge. The hollow's drawing us back along the path we know, so we don't use the path we know." He was proud of it. It was a good plan. It was the plan of a man who believes the world is a problem and he is the solver. I told him it was a good plan. I even meant it. I don't remember him leaving in the morning. That's a window I don't have. By the time I came up out of the dark into the gray, Ellis was already gone and his bedroll was cold. And the men said he'd struck out alone before light, too impatient to wait. Sure of his route, sure of his instruments. We followed his track. It was easy at first. Ellis walked like he did everything. Deliberate, even-spaced, a tidy line of boot prints due west through the leaves. And then the line began to bend. Not sharp, gentle, the way a man bends who's certain he's going straight. It curved south, then southeast, then east, a long, slow spiral, and we walked it with a growing sickness in us all, because we could see what he couldn't have seen, that the careful straight line of him was drawing a circle on the forest floor. Winding in, we heard him before we found his sign, his voice faint calling out somewhere ahead. "I've got it. I can see the creek. I'm almost to the camp." Happy, relieved, certain. The voice of a man who thinks he's just walked out into the open. We called back and ran toward it. And the voice didn't get closer. We found a flat slab of limestone in a little clearing, fog hanging in it. And on the slab, set down neat and square, the way Ellis set down everything. His boots side by side, laces tucked in. His watch still ticking, laid across the toe of one boot. And his map folded along its proper creases, the route drawn on it in pencil, ending in a small careful X where he'd marked the camp he never reached. No Ellis. No track leaving the slab. Just the boots and the watch and the map, like a man had stepped up onto that stone to get his bearings, and stepped off it into somewhere that wasn't the forest. And from under the slab, I swear this on the 7 names, from under the limestone, from down in the cold-breathing dark of the cave system that runs all through that country, we heard him, muffled, far, I'm close. I'm so close. Why can't I reach you? I can see the fire. Why can't I? We didn't leave him at once. That's the part I need you to understand. Because it's the part that nearly broke the rest of us. We stayed by that slab the whole long afternoon. Because he kept calling. And you cannot turn your back on a living voice even when every sense God gave you is screaming that the voice is already past saving. And it moved. That's the thing I can't get out from under all these years. It moved. The first time he was close. Right beneath us, his voice coming up clear through the cold limestone. Clear enough that Finn pressed his whole face flat to the rock and called his name back down into it. Ellis, Ellis, we're right here. We'll follow our voices up. And Ellis answered, close, almost cheerful. I can hear you. I'm right here. I'm coming up to you now. The voice of a man who believed the worst thing that had happened to him was a wrong turn in the dark. Then it got farther off. Only minutes later, the same voice came from down and away to our left, fainter, from under solid leaf litter, where there is no opening, no cave mouth, no crack. Just solid mountain. Why are you walking away from me? Don't walk away. I had you a second ago, and we hadn't moved. Not one of us. We were sitting dead still on that stone. It was him that was moving. Or being moved. Carried somewhere through the black-breathing veins of that country. The hollow limestone that runs under all of it like rot through a tooth. We followed the voice across the clearing on our hands and knees, all of us, ears to the cold ground like hounds. It came up next from a sinkhole a good 30 feet off, far down now, echoing. The words coming apart before they reached the top. Close, I can see the fire. Why can't I reach the fire? The same words he would say to the very end, worn smooth as river stones. The way a man repeats a thing after the thinking part of him has drowned and only the wanting part is left awake to talk. And then close again. Sudden. Right under the slab. Loud. His mouth seemingly inches beneath the rock cell but screaming now. No words in it anymore. Just the raw open sound of a man who has finally understood where he is. And how far down it goes. Finn had his ear to the stone when that one came up. And he threw himself back off the rock like he'd been struck across the face. And he was white to the lips, and he never once told me what it sounded like from that close. I never asked him. There are mercies you grant a boy, and that was the only one I had left to give. Down and far. Up and close. Far and faint and almost calm. Close and screaming. All afternoon, hour on hour. The ground playing that man back and forth through itself like breath through a flute. Moving him under our boots faster than any man could crawl, carrying him in slow circles. The same slow circles I understood with the bottom dropping out of me, that the forest had walked the rest of us in up above. As if the loop we'd been marched through that morning had a twin running underground. And poor Ellis had fallen clean out of ours and down into that one. By dark the voice was very far and very faint and gone strangely peaceful, the fight all spent out of it. Joel swore the last thing he made out, I didn't hear it myself, the last thing Ellis said from somewhere deep under that cold mountain was, "It's all right now." The map was wrong, I see it. The map was always wrong. And then the hollow took even that. And there was only the slab, and his boot set neat and square upon it, and the cold breath of the cave coming up empty through the gap in the rock. The man who trusted the map. The map walked him in circles until the ground opened, and kept the rest. I had a folded corner of paper in my breast pocket that night, torn from a survey map. I didn't remember tearing it. I have stopped by now in the telling, even trying to explain to you the things I found on myself. You've got the pattern. You're ahead of me. Maybe the men weren't. I wasn't. A man can't see the pattern of himself when he's inside it in the dark, and the dark takes his memory with it when it goes. The third piece of wood is for Ellis. Look how low the others have burned already. We've got a long way to mourn. And I'll tell you now so you can brace for it, the sixth piece is the one I still can't say fast. When we get there, you'll understand why I cut this wood slow. Wade had been getting quieter, which from Wade was a roar. He'd stopped saying he'd shoot the thing. He'd started cleaning his rifles, all three, over and over. The way frightened men do a thing with their hands to feel like the hands still matter. He kept count of the guns. He made the rest of us account for ours every evening. I had an old lever gun I carried out of habit. Joel a rifle, Sutter a rifle, Finn a rifle. Toby's and Gantry's and Ellis's weapons we'd kept rather than leave behind. Wade lined them all up and counted them every night like a man saying a rosary. The night after Ellis, the guns went missing. All of them. Out of camp in the dark while we slept. Every rifle and the lever gun, and Wade's pistol from under his own head. Wade came up howling about it. There's that word again. You'll notice I can't get away from it. We tore the camp apart and there were no tracks of any stranger. And the only thing I will tell you about that morning is that I awoke with my shoulders aching deep in the sockets, like I'd been carrying something heavy a long way. And there was a black crescent of dried mud, or what I told myself was mud, under every one of my fingernails. And I cleaned them out with the point of my knife before anyone was up. And I did not let myself think about why. We found the guns at midday. Finn found them, following a drag mark in the leaves out to a clearing none of us had been to. A flat opening in the timber, ringed with old cedar. The rifles were planted in the ground. Every one of them muzzle down, driven into the soft earth in a wide circle, stocks to the sky, a fence of black iron stalks. A perfect ring. Patient work again. That same patient craft. The work of something with all the time in the world, and hands that knew exactly what they were doing. And in the center of the ring of guns was Wade. He was on his knees in the dirt with his arms a little out from his sides, almost peaceful from a distance. Almost like a man praying in the middle of his church. We came closer. None of the guns had been fired. We checked every one. Loaded, planted, aimed inward and cold. Not a single round spent. Whatever killed Wade wanted him to die surrounded by all that firepower, and to know in his last seconds that none of it would save him. That the steel and the powder he'd loved more than people had been arranged into a monument to how little they were worth. He hadn't been shot. He'd been pierced, driven through in a dozen places by things that came up out of the ground itself. Old bone, splintered antler gone gray and hard as flint with age. The shed crowns of bucks dead 50 years, and longer bones I didn't want to name, all of it broken to wicked points and rammed up through him from below as he knelt, so that he was held up off his heels by what had gone into him. A man on a bed of old hunting ground bone in the middle of a circle of his own useless guns. The earth there was full of it. I dug a little with my hands later when the others had gone. I don't know why. The way you press a sore tooth, and the ground was full of bone for as deep as I went. Antler and skull and the long bones of game, generations of it. An old killing floor. A place where animals had been brought to die for longer than any cabin had stood. The forest's own trophy room, and Wade, the trophy of it, knelt in the middle. Sutter looked at me over Wade's body the way he'd been looking at me for days. But this time he said something. Quiet, just to me while the others were sick in the cedars. He said, "It comes from camp, that's all." Watching my face. The howl. The first night, and every night. The others all turned to the ridge. I've watched where it comes from. It comes from camp, and he let that sit between us. And he did not say the next part, the part that was right there in his gray eyes. And I did not ask him to say it. And I have thought 10,000 times since about what would have happened if I'd let him finish. If I'd said, "Go on, say it." If I'd helped him drag it into the light while there were still 4 of us alive, I didn't. I told him grief makes a man hear things wrong. And I walked away from the only one of them who had it figured, because I could not stand to turn around and look at what he was pointing at. Which was me. The 4th piece. For Wade. There's 3 pieces left beside me. You've started watching them instead of the fire. Most people do about now. By the time Wade died, Sutter had already stopped sleeping. I mean, stopped completely. The way only a man can who's decided that sleep is the dangerous thing and not the dark. He sat up every night with his back to a tree and his face to the camp. Watching. Watching all of us. Watching, I understood later, mainly me. It wasn't the water that started it. The reflection in the water was the end of a thing that had been building in him for nights. And I only learned the rest of it after, from Finn, who lay awake near the old man and caught him whispering to himself the things he was seeing and couldn't yet make himself believe. The first thing Sutter noticed was the breathing. He'd watch me sleep. flat on my back, hands folded on my chest still, and he'd count my breaths the way a sleepless man counts anything, because somebody else's rhythm is the only clock in the dark. And some nights, he told the boy, my breathing would stop. Not the little hitch a sleeping man makes and takes up again. Stop, 20 seconds, 30, a full minute. My chest not moving at all. The dead stillness of a thing laid out for burial. And then it would start again, smooth, easy, like nothing. Like the body had simply set the air down for a while because it didn't happen to need it. A living man cannot do that. Sutter knew it. He counted it 3 nights running, and he said not one word to me. Because what in God's name do you say? I sat up and watched you not breathe? You don't say that to a man over breakfast. You watch him a 4th night. And on the 4th night of his not sleeping, he saw the thing he'd been trying not to see. I have to tell you this part the way he told it in the morning, with his voice gone strange and flat, because I wasn't awake for it. Or the part of me that was awake that night doesn't share its memories with the part of me that's talking to you now. There's a wall in me. I live on one side of it. The nights live on the other. Sutter said he'd been watching the fire die down. He said I was asleep across from it, on my back the way I slept. He could see me clear in the low red light. Breathing still. A tired old guy to sleep, and then he made a mistake. There was a pool of creek water at the edge of camp. Dead flat black holding the firelight, and he looked down into it, to rest his eyes off the fire glare, just to look at something dark for a moment. And in the water, he said I wasn't asleep. In the water, where I lay, there was something standing. He couldn't describe it right, and the failing of his words frightened him more than a clear picture would have. He said it was tall, too tall, hunched, but if it straightened, it would have been twice a man. He said it was jointed wrong, the legs bending in places legs don't bend, the long arms hung with too many knuckles. He said it was furred, black, wet-looking, and the head. He stopped telling me there and put his hand over his mouth. The head had the long face and the wrong horns of the thing the old people drew, and it was bent over the fire. Over the place where I lay, the way you'd bend over to look at something you meant to eat. He looked up fast and at the actual fire, at the actual me, and I was lying there asleep, just a man. He looked back down into the water, and the thing was still standing there, in the reflection, where the man lay sleeping in the world, the same body, asleep in the light, standing in the dark water. The reflection telling the truth, the light was lying about. Sutter went after that a little out of his mind, and I can't blame him. I'd have gone the same way or worse. He decided the reflection was the real thing and the daylight man was the mask, and that the only safety was to make sure no surface in that camp could ever show the truth again. He broke everything that could hold an image. He smashed Wade's rifle scopes against the rocks. He shattered Ellis's recovered watch glass, the signal mirror in the first aid kit, the polished lid of a tin, the lens of Toby's binoculars, even the screen of the trail camera Finn had set, though I didn't understand the importance of that camera yet. None of us did. The camera matters terribly, and we'll come to it. He went around the camp like a man possessed, breaking every eye the world had, every dark pool he'd cover with leaves and dirt, stamping the creek edge to mud so it couldn't hold a picture. And the whole time he muttered the same thing over and over, "Don't look at him sleeping. Don't look at him sleeping." He grabbed Joel by the collar and set it into his face. He said it to Finn. He wouldn't say which him. Maybe he didn't dare. Maybe he hoped he was wrong. Maybe by then he was too far gone to make the word. He didn't make it through the night. He'd broken every reflective thing in camp but one, the one he couldn't break, the dark water of the creek itself, the whole black creek running through the bottom. A long mirror you can't smash, and in the morning we found him face down in it in 6 inches of water, drowned. His gray head turned to the side, as if at the last he'd had to look. Had to check one more time, had to see whether the thing in the water was still standing where the sleeping man should be. His fingers had dug deep grooves in the mud of the bank. He'd fought it. Whatever he saw, he'd fought it the whole way down. I have his words yet. He'd scratched them into the dirt of the bank with a stick before he went into the water. Big and ragged. The last warning of a man who'd figured it out and couldn't make anyone believe him in time. Don't look at him sleeping. I read it crouched over his drowned body. And I felt the calm come into me again, off the cold, dead smell of him, that terrible kitchen-warm peace. And this time God help me, this time I understood enough to be afraid of the piece. Not of the killer. Of the part of me that was glad. The fifth piece is for Sutter. He's the one who almost saved everybody. Just by looking in the water. Almost. The forest is full of almost. 3 of us left then. Me, Joel, the good one, and Finn, the boy, and Joel. I have to tell you about Joel, and I have to do it slow because if I do it fast, I won't be able to do it at all. This is the part I came up to these mountains to be able to say beside a fire. This is the splinter I've never been able to dig out. Joel had figured it out too. Not all the way, not like Finn would, but enough. He'd watched Sutter break the mirrors and read the words scratched in the mud. And he was a gentleman, but he wasn't a stupid one. And he'd started to see the shape of it. The howls from camp. The missing hours. The way I was always last asleep and first to be found in the morning. Bruised and muddy and far from where I'd lain down. The blood under my nails I thought I hid. The things in my pockets, but Joel was the good one. I told you, there's one in every group. And the thing about the good one, the terrible thing, the thing that gets them killed, is that when they figure out the monster, they don't reach for a gun, they reach for the man inside it. Finn wanted to leave. Finn was already half sure, already watching me the way you watch a snake you're not certain is dead. Finn wanted to take the 2 of them and run for the truck and leave me behind in the hollow with whatever I was. And he was right. He was completely right. And I have never wished harder that a man had done the cold right thing. Joel wouldn't let him. Joel said, and I heard this. I was meant to hear it. I think he wanted me to. Joel said, he doesn't know. Look at him in the daytime. He doesn't know what he is. You don't leave a man alone in the dark with the worst thing about himself. You stay and you talk to him and you remind him he's a man, because maybe that's the only rope long enough to pull him back up. He decided I could be saved. He decided the daytime man was the real one, and the night thing was the sickness, and that a sick man doesn't get abandoned. He gets sat up with. So that last night Joel stayed by me on purpose. Finn he sent up into a tree, a hunting stand with his rifle and orders to watch and to come down for nothing. Nothing. No matter what he saw or heard. Stay treed till the sun was full up. Finn fought him on it and Joel won, because Joel was the kind of man you couldn't say no to when he was being good at you. And then Joel sat down beside me at the fire, with no weapon in his hands at all, and he started to talk to me. I remember this night. That's the horror of it. Of all of them. This is the one the dark gives me back in pieces, because I think some part of me will not be allowed to forget it, ever as the punishment. I remember Joel's voice, low, even, going on and on into the dark. He talked about ordinary things, fishing, a dog he'd had as a boy, the way you talk to keep a frightened animal calm. And every time the shaking started in me, and it had started coming earlier in the night by then, the fever, the bones beginning their slow wrong shift under the skin, the dark hunger rising up the back of my throat. Every time it started, Joel would put his hand flat on my chest right over the breastbone, right over the place where the howl lived, and he'd say my name. And he'd say, "Oh, stay with me. You're a man. Stay a man. I've got you." He told me about his brother that night in a way I don't think he'd ever told anybody. The brother's name was Daniel. They'd hunted woods like these since they were boys, and it was Daniel who'd wanted to come after the howler in the first place. Daniel who believed in it. Daniel who used to say the best stories are the ones the old men are too afraid to finish. And Daniel had died that spring. Slow. A sickness that ate him down to nothing across a year. Took the weight off him, and then the strength. And then, at the very end, the knowing. And Joel had sat with him through every night of it. He told me that low, his hand warm and flat on my chest. He said I sat with him every night, even at the end when he didn't know my face anymore, especially then. He said, "You don't stop sitting with a man just because the thing in the bed has quit looking like him." He said that was the whole of what love came down to. When you boiled all the rest of it off, staying in the chair, I was shaking hard by then. The fever was in deep, and the cold hunger was climbing the back of my throat, and I had my fists buried in the dirt to keep my hands from doing what they wanted to do. And I got it out while I still could talk. That early in the night I could still talk. I said, "You need to go, Joel. Go up the tree with the boy. There's something wrong with me." And he said, easy, like I'd remarked on the weather, "I know there is. I've known a couple days now. And he did not move an inch. I said, "You don't know what it is." He said, "Neither do you. That's exactly why I'm staying. I want you to sit a minute with how kind that was. And how wrong. And how kind. The two of them braided so tight you couldn't cut one loose from the other. He had worked out just enough to be afraid. And he had decided that being afraid was not a good enough reason to leave a man alone with the worst night of his life. And he said the thing I carry, the sentence I hear on the nights I can't get under. He said, "A man's not only the worst thing inside him. If he was, there'd be no point to a single one of us. My brother wasn't the sickness that killed him. And you're not the thing that's coming up in you tonight. It's just the loudest part of you right now. I'm not here for that part. I'm here for the rest of you. The rest of you is still in there. And I'm going to sit right here and talk to it till the sun comes up." And he did. God help me, he did. He talked about Daniel teaching him to call turkeys when they were boys. He talked about a creek the two of them used to fish, where the water ran so clear you could lie on the bank and count the stones on the bottom. He talked about mercy. He said mercy wasn't a feeling that rose up in you when you needed it. He said it was a decision a man made ahead of time, in the calm, so that it would already be there waiting for him when the calm was gone. He said he'd made his decision about me 2 days back. He said it the way you'd mention a debt you'd already paid, so I'd quit worrying over it. I begged him one more time, near the worst of it, when I could feel my own jaw beginning to ache and slide in its hinges. I got out. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever I do, it wasn't me. You tell the boy that. You tell somebody it wasn't me." And Joel smiled at me across the dying fire, this sad, steady, terrible smile. And he said, "It's all right. I'm not going to tell anybody anything bad about you." He meant it as the kindest thing one man can say to another. He meant it as comfort and as a promise and as a blessing on a sick friend in the dark. And it went down into me like a stone dropped into a well, turning over and never hitting the bottom, because some buried part of me already understood why Joel was not going to be telling anybody anything, ever again about anything at all, and it was not kindness that was going to keep him quiet. I tried. I want you to know I tried. The daytime man tried that whole night to hold on, with Joel's hand on his chest and Joel's voice in his ears, tried to be the rope and not the thing. I remember his hand on my chest. I remember the warmth of it. The window closes there is dark, and then there is gray light, and I'm sitting up by a dead fire, and my whole body is one deep ache, and my jaws locked tight and slick, and I am holding something in my own 2 hands and looking down at it and not understanding, the way you don't understand a word you've said too many times. It was Joel's hand. Just his hand, severed clean at the wrist, the way Toby would have taken it off a deer, and I was holding it in both of mine, the way you'd hold something precious, the way you'd hold the hand of a man you were saying goodbye to. His wedding ring was still on it. The warmth was gone out of it, and there was blood dried black up both my arms to the elbow, and dirt packed under all my nails, and his name in my mouth, Joel, because the last thing the daytime man had heard before the dark took him was his own name in Joel's voice, saying, "Stay a man, I've got you." And the first thing the daytime man knew on waking was his friend's hand in his hands, and his friend nowhere, we never found the rest of him. Only the hand, the part that had touched my chest all night, trying to hold me human. The man who tried to save me I unmade in the dark. The one rope long enough to pull me back, I bit through. I want to stop here a while. Let me feed the fire, the 6th piece. For Joel. I always take a long time with Joel's piece. You can wait. The night isn't going anywhere. And neither am I. There now, Finn. The boy had been up in the tree all night the way Joel told him to. And here is the thing I didn't know until the very end. The thing that turned everything. Finn hadn't only watched. Finn had been building a case for days, quiet, careful, the way that kind of young hunter is careful, gathering his evidence the way he'd gather sign on a track, not letting himself believe the conclusion until the conclusion was the only thing the sign could mean. And up in that tree, watching the fire, watching what came down out of me in the dark. And what it did. Finn finished his case. He came down at full light, not with a wild story, with a list. A hunter's list. Cold. Checked. True. He found me by the dead fire with Joel's hand still in my lap. And he didn't scream and he didn't run, which I have never understood, except that I think he'd already grieved all the way through to the other side and come out somewhere past fear, into the flat, clear country where you just need, before you die or escape, to make the other man say it. He stood a little way off, with his rifle low but ready, and he laid it out. He said, "The tracks. Every morning there's tracks around camp. Barefoot, big, wrong. I followed where they start. They don't come in from the woods. They start at your bedroll. They start where you lie down. The thing doesn't come to camp from out there. It leaves camp and from right where you sleep. Walks the night and comes back and lies down in your place before light." He said, "The howl." Sutter was right. We all turned to the ridge. But it's never from the ridge. I was up in the tree. I watched. It comes from camp. It comes from you. The first night and every night, he said, "The camera," and he held it up. The little trail camera Sutter had smashed the screen of, but the card inside still held what it had caught. And Finn had hooked it to his phone in the tree, through the long night and gone through it frame by frozen frame. He said, "It never once caught anything coming into camp. We kept saying the thing got past us. It never did." The cameras pointed at the bedrolls. And in the night, every night, it catches the same thing. It catches you getting up. It catches you stand up off your bedroll and change as you stand, and walk off into the dark on two legs that stop being a man's legs by the third step. There's no monster coming in. "There's a man going out," he said. "We hit it. Wade hit it that first time it came before he died. He never told you. He told me. He got off one shot in the dark and swore it connected. And the next morning you had a fresh wound high on your side you said you caught on a snag. We dug Wade's load out of the clearing dirt later. It was the silver. Wade carried a few hand-cast silver rounds, old family habit, his granddad's, against the Howler. He laughed about it, but he carried them. And the one he fired that night is the one that opened your side. Steel never marked the thing. The silver marked you. And he said the last one, quietest of all, the one that was the whole shape of it. The one Sutter had been circling and Joel had died refusing to fully believe. He said, "The monster never followed us back to camp. There was never a monster out there to follow us. It was already in camp. It was lying down in the middle of us the whole time. Every night sleeping, looking like the man we trusted to keep us safe. We hired the thing that hunted us. We paid it. We followed it in here. We've been sleeping next to it for 9 days," and he stopped. And the woods were dead silent, that animal silence where there should be sound. And he looked at me and he was crying without seeming to know it, and he said, "Say it. I've watched 6 men die, and I need the 7th thing in this hollow to look me in the eye and say it before I run. What are you? Say what you are." And here is where the wall came down. I had spent 9 days not seeing. 31 years, maybe. Not seeing, if I'm honest. If it had been in me a long time, dormant. The old hollow's gift to whatever family of mine first walked these mountains, sleeping in my blood, and waking only when I brought it home to the one place that could call it up. I had built a wall in myself between the day and the night, and I had lived on the day side and let the night side eat in the dark, and never, ever turned around to look. When Finn said, "Say what you are," I turned around. I'm going to try to give it to you the way it came. Not as a story, because it didn't come as a story. It came as the wall breaking, and all the dark behind it pouring through at once. Every missing hour arriving in the same instant. And it nearly killed the man that's talking to you. And some days I wish it had. It came as the feeling of my own hands changing, the knuckles splitting wider, the fingers lengthening, the nails coming up thick and curved out of beds that tore to let them. And the relief of it, that's the part you can't tell a person who hasn't felt it. The awful relief, like taking off boots 2 sizes too small at the end of a long day. The relief of a body finally allowed to be the shape it's been holding in. It came as the bones moving under the skin, the whole frame of me rearranging, the long crack of the jaw unhinging and resetting longer, the spine pulling, the legs finding their wrong new joints, and all of it agony, every night agony, a fever that burned in the marrow. And I understood at last why I woke aching in every socket, why my jaw ached, why my shoulders ached like I'd carried weight. I had carried weight. I'd carried the men. I'd dragged the guns. I'd done the patient work. And I'd done it all in a body breaking and remaking itself in the cold. It came as blood in my mouth. Not the taste of it after, the want of it before. The dark hunger rising up the back of the throat like a second tongue, and the way it narrowed the whole world down to warm meat. And the smell that calmed me, that I'd leaned over Gantry's ruined throat and breathed in like a man at a stove. Because to the thing that smell isn't horror, it's home. It came as the man as pieces. Toby's hands up, trying to ward me off while the patient part of me decided what he'd be made into. Gantry trying to scream, and the scream coming out as the cry I'd taught him to fear. Ellis's voice going on, certain, calm. I'm close, as I carried him down into the breathing dark of the stone. Weight on his knees in the bone, Sutter's gray eyes meeting mine across the dark water, knowing the instant before that the reflection had told him true, and Joel's hand on my chest. Joel's voice saying, stay a man, I've got you, and all night, and the thing in me waiting, patient, until the daytime man's strength finally gave out, near dawn. And it came, and worst of all, there is the calm. The terrible calm after. The full warm peace of the fed animal, lying down in the place the man slept, pulling the man's shape back on like a coat, sliding back behind the wall, leaving the daytime man to wake in the gray light with dirt in his mouth, and a tooth in his pocket, and his friend's hand in his lap, and no memory but a deep, shameful animal rest. That's the thing I could never forgive. Not the blood. Men have done blood and been forgiven. It's that some part of me, the part I share a body with, the part that lives on the other side of my wall and uses my hands, that part was content. It hunted those men with their own flaws and fears. It used Toby's love of hides and Gantry's mocking cry and Wade's worship of guns and Ellis's faith in his map and Sutter's need to look and Joel's need to save. It used everything that made them who they were as the instrument of how they died. And then it lay down, full and calm in the middle of the people who trusted me. And it slept well. I sleep well on the nights it gets out. I wake rested. That's the horror I've been carrying. Not that I'm a monster. That the monster and I share a peace I have no right to. I stood up in front of Finn as it all came through me. The daytime man and the night thing in the same body at the same time, for the first and only time fully awake to both. And I felt it start to rise. In the daylight, called up by the truth, the way the howl was called up by Finn saying it. I felt my hands begin, and I had just enough of the man left to do the one thing I'd never been able to do in the dark. I told him to run. I said, run, boy. Get to the truck. Don't look back. Run. Now. In a voice that was already going wrong in my throat, already tearing toward the cry, and Finn ran. But it was faster than the man's mercy. It always is. As he turned, the thing in me was already across the camp, and it caught him at the tree line, and we bit him. Once. High on the shoulder, through the jacket, deep enough to mark him to the bone. The blood came, and the smell of it rose, and the calm started to pour in, and Finn tore loose, left a piece of his jacket and a piece of himself in my teeth, and ran, and the man came up screaming inside the thing. Screaming, no, not this one. Let this one go, and for once, the one time in all of it, the man won. The thing let him go, or lost him, or, and I have wondered this in the worst hour, or wanted him gone. Carrying what it gave him, the way a thing wants to put out seed. Finn made the truck. Finn drove out of Howler Hollow alive, the only one bitten but breathing, and I stood at the tree line in the full daylight, slowly becoming a man again, alone with the dead fire, and Joel's hand, and the silence where 6 men used to be. And I thought, I let myself think, at least the boy got out. At least the boy escaped the horror. That's the 7th window. It's the one I lived in for 3 years. At least the boy escaped. I built a small false peace in it. I deserved no peace, and I built one anyway out of the one man I didn't kill. They found me 4 days later, wandered out half dead to a logging road. I told them a black bear had gotten into camp. A rogue bear. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't prove the other thing, because there was no other thing a sane man could prove. Finn never spoke against me. I've wondered why. I think now he knew that telling the truth wouldn't put the right thing in a cage, because the right thing couldn't be caged. It could only be carried, and he was the one carrying it now. I think he kept my secret because we shared it. That's a bond no two men should have. I quit guiding. You understand why now. I gave it all up. I don't go in the deep woods anymore, except this. Except the fire on the nights I tell it. I don't hunt. I haven't touched a rifle in all these years. I can't, my hands won't. The steel feels like a lie in them now. The way it lied to Wade, I don't eat meat. I learned that the hard way. Learned what the smell of it does to me. Learned that the dark hunger is always down there sleeping, and you do not feed a sleeping thing. Not even a little. Not even once. I keep their 7 names written on a paper, folded in my breast pocket, where I used to carry a torn corner of a dead man's map. Toby, Gantry, Wade, Ellis, Sutter, Joel, Finn. I take it out and I read it most days. I owe them their names. It's the cheapest thing I owe them and the only one I can afford. And there are nights, you'll have guessed, there are nights, certain nights when the fever comes up in me even now, even old, even far from the hollow. When I feel the wall in me thin and the thing on the other side stir and stretch. On those nights I have a length of chain bolted into the rock behind my cabin, and I put the cuffs on my own wrists and ankles before dark, and I throw the key out of reach, and I sit in the cold, and I wait it out. And I starve it. And in the morning I'm still chained, and the chain has held, and I weep with relief every time that the chain held. But I'll tell you the true thing. The thing under all the chains and the 7 names and the no meat and the no guns. The thing I came up here to be able to say beside a fire, so the woods could hear me say it. People think a man like me lives in fear of the monster. I don't. I've made my peace with the monster the way you make peace with a bad heart. A thing in you that'll likely take you in the end. That's not the fear. The fear is the part of me that misses it. The fear is that some mornings chained and weeping with relief, under the relief way down, there's a small black thread of disappointment. That the chain held, that I didn't get out, that I won't get to feel the relief of the changing, and the world going simple and red and warm, and the patient hands at their patient work, and the deep good rest of the fed animal lying down full among the trusting. I starve it. Every night I starve it. But you can't starve a thing you don't keep alive a little, and that means it's awake just enough to want. And so am I. And we want the same thing, that's the punishment. There is no clean side of the wall left to live on. Only a man and a monster sharing a hunger and a chain and a fire and a long row of nights. It's not forgiveness, and nobody forgave me. I didn't ask. It's not a cure, there's no cure. It's just this. Sitting up. Holding the line, refusing one more night to be what I am. You're waiting for the 7th piece of wood. I see you looking at it. I've been putting one in for each of them all night. You'll have understood that long ago. Toby, Gantry, Wade, Ellis, Sutter, Joel. 6 pieces in the fire. 6 men I unmade, the fire's high now off them. It's a good hot fire. It leans at you, and I told you not to lean back. The 7th piece is for Finn, the one I didn't kill, the one who got out, and you'd think his would be the easy one, the kind one. The piece I put in glad. At least the boy escaped, I told you. At least one of them I let go. But I have to finish it. And the finish is why I really light the fire. The finish is the thing I never put in the official telling. The thing I only say out here, with the chain ready behind the cabin and the woods listening. 3 years after Howler Hollow, I heard about another case. A different state, north and east of here. Mountain country, the kind of remote a city man can't imagine. A hunting party gone wrong, a ruined camp. Men missing, deaths the papers called an animal attack and the locals wouldn't talk about at all. And there were 2 details in it. 2 little details that traveled down to me through the long quiet networks that men like me still keep. And they put the cold all the way through me and have kept it there since, barefoot tracks, big wrong, around the dead fire. Tracks that didn't come in from the woods and 1 survivor. 1 man who got out alive and half mad, who they couldn't get a straight story from. Who kept saying the same thing over and over, the way Sutter scratched it in the mud. The way a man says a thing that's true and that nobody will believe. He kept saying, the howl came from inside a sleeping man. I don't know it was Finn. I want to be careful. I never went and looked, because I was afraid of what I'd find and more afraid of what I'd be tempted to do once I found it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe a different animal. A different madman. A coincidence shaped exactly like my whole life. I'll let you keep your own counsel on it. The not knowing is the only mercy left in it, and I won't take yours. But here's what I have to tell you. And then I'll put in the seventh piece. And then we're done, and you should go, because the fire is getting low now. Whether it looks it or not, and you don't want to be sitting across from me when it's only embers. For 3 years, I thought I'd carried my guilt out of Howler Hollow, and that the guilt was the whole of what I carried. I thought the worst of me died in there with those 6 men, and the boy carried out nothing but his life and a scar. I was wrong. I didn't carry out my guilt. Or not only, I carried out a bloodline. I put it in him with my teeth at the tree line. One bite, the way a thing wants to put out seed. And I let him run because the man in me thought he was saving him, and the thing in me knew exactly what it had done. And it sleeps in him now the way it sleeps in me, behind a wall he doesn't know he has. And one cold autumn it'll wake in some far hollow, and he'll stand up off his bedroll in the night and not come back the same, and there'll be barefoot tracks around a dead fire, and one survivor saying the howl came from inside a sleeping man, and so on, down whatever line of bitten men runs out from that one boy I told to run. People are afraid of the howl that comes out of the trees. They lie awake listening to the ridgeline. They've got it backward. They always have. The thing you have to be afraid of isn't out there in the dark timber, where you can point your gun at it. It's the one that lies down next to you, wearing the face of the man you trust to keep you safe. It's the one that's already in the camp. It's the one waiting inside your own chest, or his, or now maybe in yours. There, the seventh piece. For Finn, and for whoever Finn made. And for you, friend, who came up the mountain to hear a ghost story, and sat too long beside a fire that doesn't love you, with an old man who told you not to trust it, and then kept you here till the embers. Now you know why the fire likes faces. It's been reading yours all night. Same as me. Anyway, the fire's low now. You feel that? How quiet it's gotten? Listen, no birds. No squirrels. None of the small honest business of the woods at night. Animal silence. Where there should be sound. That's how you know the wrong things come into the clearing. Go on now. Run for your truck. Don't look back. Run, Shaw, now. And on the dark road home tonight, whatever you do, don't look too long at the man sleeping in the seat beside you. Don't look at him sleeping. The fire's just about out. I've got the chain. But I threw the key, friend. I always throw the key.